Hello, Louise. Thank
Hello,
you so
Kate.
much. I love that you've carved out an hour to have a little yarn with me from your busy schedule. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's
So,
great to be here.
everybody, oh, you're welcome. This is Louise. She is the general manager of Byron Community Centre, which also runs the Fletcher, is that right? Fletcher House?
Fletcher Street
Homeless
Cottage.
Hub. Fletcher Street Cottage Homeless Hub in Byron. Um, Also, my dear friend. We've been friends now for about 20 years, perhaps. And also a spiritual truth seeker like me. So we're mega ultra spiros together. And we've been on that train for about 15 of those years. Louise introduced me to yoga. I introduced her to mindfulness, and yeah, that was the beginning of our spiritual journey together, crossing paths, being each other's precious teachers. So, can you tell everyone a little bit about your very unique and wonderful job?
Thank you. I'd be delighted to. I am the General Manager of Byron Community Centre, which is where I'm speaking right now. I'd like to acknowledge that this is Bundjalung country and the Arakwal people are the local people, and pay my respects to all of them and how they care for this land. Where I'm sitting right now, this building is 130 years old, so it's got a long, rich history in the community. It's probably one of the oldest institutions in the region, and it's also independent. Most community centres around Australia are council housed or government supported, etc. But this is, I guess, a fiercely independent organisation, which it makes it a little bit different. When I first took the job, I actually Googled other community centres, going, I'll just connect with other people, do the job and ask them how they do that. There's nothing like it. So I've been here nearly 6 years, and the community centre does lots of things. It's a not-for-profit charity which runs Byron Markets, has Byron Theatre. We've got meeting rooms. I'm in one at the moment, and a bunch of shops and meeting spaces, and also supports the homeless. And the community centre has always actually responded to what the community needs. At one point it was, mother and child programs, etc. But over the last 20 years, more and more people have been coming to the door going, help, I'm experiencing homelessness, or I'm escaping DV, or whatever other circumstance, can you help me? So we were trying to help people from the front door, which wasn't really working. Someone would come in and say, I'd like to buy a ticket to the theatre. Someone else would say, I'm interested in the markets. And then there'd be a woman coming in, which I've seen myself, saying, help, I'm escaping DV, I've got my kids in the car, what do I do? So it just wasn't working, having all of those things happening in the one spot. So nearly 3 years ago, we opened Fletcher Street Cottage, and that's a big part of what we do. We provide a drop-in centre for those experiencing homelessness.
So important. And the homelessness, housing crisis has had a big impact on everybody that I work with in the not-for-profit space, and also myself personally. It's the whole landscape, as if it wasn't bad enough before, but COVID just changed the shape of that into a whole other level, right?
Well, what most people may not realise is that Byron Bay has the highest rough sleepers in the whole state, higher than the city of Sydney. It's
Wow.
just off the chain here. And then the next thing I usually hear from people is like, oh, people choose to be homeless in Byron. It's such a nice place. You just go there and you can sleep on the beach. People don't choose to be homeless here. Most people that come through our doors, and we have about 80 a day, are local people. People have got their kids in school. They might have some work here. They might have their doctor and their family members, etc. here. So, yeah, it's a bit of a fallacy about, go to Byron and be homeless. It's a terrible place to experience homelessness because there's no Centrelink, there's no emergency housing, there's no DV housing, there's no affordable housing. It's about as bad as you can get.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I guess you'd be very right there to think that, you know, people would instantly associate that kind of hippie gypsy lifestyle, like, oh, I'll just sleep on the beach in my, you know, frilly skirt. Yeah, not the case, right? No, I've seen it
Not the
firsthand.
case at all.
Challenging stuff. To be a service provider of homelessness services and housing services in this housing crisis, because it's just one of the things that all humans need, and it's really makes me angry that we've gotten to this place in Australia where the basic needs of housing and fresh, healthy food is so scarcely available to those without, you know, disposable incomes, it makes me mad. Yeah. So how which brings us to the topic of what we were talking about before. We were having a good old laugh before we went live about the unique challenges of being in a professional role in not-for-profit space. Do you want to share a little bit about that, what that looks like for you and your team?
Yeah. So when I first started this job, Kate, you gave me I call her Kate. Most people say Katrina, but she's Kate to me.
That's my fancy name, but you call me Kate.
Kate spoke to me about the burnout rate of people in social work, and you'd already burnt out, I think, 3 times by then.
At least.
You talked about the 80% sort of burnout rate. So that really stuck in my mind when we opened up Fletcher Street Cottage and we started employing community support workers, people with social work degrees. And I was like, Kate, telling me about the burnout. I can't have my staff burn out. So we really did try and put a lot of things in place to help support the team from the word go, 3 years ago when we brought people on. But it certainly is a challenge. It certainly is a challenge to try and support the huge need we have in the community with very little resources. So we don't have any ongoing government funding. We don't have enough money to operate 5 days a week. We're closed today because we can't afford to open Mondays. We open from 7 till 9 in the morning for breakfast, and then 9 till 12 for all sorts of services. Appointment with a support worker, mental health, podiatrist, GP, housing providers, etc. So all of that happens kind of under the one roof, but we close at 12. So that's really difficult for somebody who's a beautiful, empathic frontline worker who sees a woman with a baby come and knock on the door at 12:30. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Are you going to let them in? Are you going to help them because she's out there begging for help? These are the challenges that you face as a manager, and also as a frontline worker. How are you going to manage that when your heart's just pulling to open the door and help them, and then what consequence that has? So it's about, as a manager, for me, it's all about managing the limited resources, trying to optimize the outcomes, and then also keeping the staff well-being top of mind. Yeah.
And this is not a challenge, I think, that's unique to just you guys. I think it's a challenge that all service provision type models have, and I see it a lot, and it can cause some really difficult conflict in teams, because I call it the square peg round hole syndrome, where managers are coming to the space with the need to operate within the limits of economics in order to keep the cogs turning. And then the frontline staff are coming to it with their emotional intelligence and their empathy and their compassion and their skill, their interpersonal skills, which have literally nothing to do with economics. And then the two come together and they try to make something work, but the two actually don't fit. So there's always this, like, I call it the bridge, There's always this bridge between the two, and both people have to come onto the bridge. Like the frontline workers need to understand where managers coming from, and managers need to understand where they're coming from. But what I find super helpful is doing some work on everybody's professional values, because most of us understand that we come to this work, unfortunately, for not maximum financial gain. We come to it because of the values in our soul. And when you dig a little bit deeper between managers and executive directors and frontline workers, what you find is that everybody's got the same values. It's just we're trying to fit them within the limitations of the society that requires economics to be the measuring tool for value.
Well,
was a lot of words, wasn't it?
It's not just the economic tool for value. It's just the hard facts of, we used to be open 5 days a week, but we didn't have enough money to operate that, so we had to close to 4 days a week. It's just supply and demand, and the only way I get supply is through donations. So it's just about going out there and asking our community, asking businesses, asking individuals, philanthropic organisations, all sorts of different funding streams. And if I haven't got enough money, I can't pay someone or do the services. And when I say pay someone, we also have 3 times as many volunteers as we do staff. So there's just no way we could do what we do without the volunteers. But I still need the paid staff there. I still need security. I still need, pay for the audit and insurance and all the hard costs that you have. And I can only do that if I've got donations in. Yeah. As simple as that. You need the money to open the door.
Yes. But the person standing there in front of that woman with the baby on the hip, none of that matters to them. And in that moment, right, like I'm sure you've had the same scenario as the manager. Like in that moment, it's the heart only that wants to have a say, and it's so difficult to set boundaries like that. Like, how do we set those boundaries? I've got a few ideas, but setting boundaries in a space where it's really, really morally challenging for me, starts with understanding why I'm setting those boundaries, and that has to start with understanding what you're doing and why, and then drawing the line in the sand myself. But I've had plenty of managers that were really, really supportive, like yourself, who get trainings in and support their staff, who have had to set boundaries for me because I couldn't do it for myself. And it causes conflict. Sometimes you're not, as the manager, the most favourite person in the room.
I would say, to add to that usually I'll explain it in terms of their colleagues. It seems to me that frontline workers will get boundaries when they understand how it will impact their colleague that they work side by side on the front line with. So, for example, yes, there's a woman out there at 12:30 with a baby on a hip. What happens tomorrow when you're not working and there's an old drunk man out there demanding to come and see someone, to your colleague? Do we not allow him in?
Yeah. It gets so blurry, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it starts to make them realise about choices that we're making and how they might impact their fellow workers. And that, to me, seems to resonate the most.
And then when we've done all that really difficult work of setting boundaries and supporting our colleagues and understanding the bigger picture, like discharging and understanding the level of stress that actually causes in your biology, and then dealing with that appropriately rather than just punching on to the next task, next client, because the need never ends, right? Nothing changes, really. We just keep plowing along. But I think we underestimate how stressful it is to set boundaries like that. Hold all that in our head and heart.
Yeah, that's right. I've read all the books, I've done all the courses, I do all the practices, and yet still here I am,
Same. Do the training. I train people and I still do it. Like, let's just be honest. Let's be really honest about this kind of work. It's just a constant learning game, a constant balance, a constant reframing, and getting back on the program. Like, nobody's ever perfect at it, and it's complicated stuff, really.
Yeah, I find for me personally, what helps is if I do daily practices, if I almost write my schedule for the week that builds in the parasympathetic nervous, a system allowing that to happen. So, for example, at the start of all my team meetings, I make everybody lie there with legs up the wall.
Oh, nice.
It's a very simple thing to do. It's so simple. There's nothing you need to do except lie there. You don't have to concentrate on your breathing. You have to do anything, but it calms your nervous system.
Yeah.
So there's things that you can do. There's little physiological things that you can do like that. There's I meditate every morning, thanks to Kate, who introduced me to mindfulness and meditation. And then I started teaching it and brought you on board, I think.
I know. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I do yoga every morning, thanks to.
Yeah. Yoga is another big one about getting in touch with your body and noticing sensations in your body. So I find having certain practices every week. I see a counsellor and I talk very openly about that with my team, about the importance of doing that, even when you think you're feeling okay, just to make sure you've got supervision or something in place. There's lots of little things that you can do during the week. I do yoga most mornings. I read lots of books about all of this stuff. I was sharing with Kate just off air about Dr. Libby Weaver, Exhaustion to Energetic is the latest book I'm reading. And she's fabulous nutritionist, biochemist, writer, talking about what happens in your body when we're so addicted to being busy, or when we're in this mode a lot. I read her first book called Rushing Women Syndrome, and I was in such a rush I accidentally bought 2 of them.
Yes, you're the ultimate rusher. I love it. Come on, let's go. What's next?
Yeah,
come on.
Right. So I thought that was hilarious that I was in such a rush online. Quick, I've got to buy this book. I'm in a hurry. I've got to do the next thing, and I accidentally bought 2.
That's great.
Yeah, but just learning about what this constant busyness and pressure does to your body is fascinating, and what we can do to mitigate it. It takes a bit of work, and it takes a bit of scheduling in your routine, these particular things.
Yeah. And I feel like it takes a lot of things and people to put a human back together, or to keep one put together. So, like, understanding that you're never going to reach some sort of magic mile where you no longer feel exhausted, or you're no longer threatened by burnout, that you've got it all figured out. It just doesn't happen. It's just constant. Read this book, do that big, try this. Listening to your body, noticing what you need. And when you are exhausted and burnout, the worst thing you can do is stuff it under the rug and pretend it's not happening. And I see that happen so much in the not-for-profit space. I don't know about corporate space. I know you've done a lot of time working in corporate spaces as well, but I'd be interested to hear if it's the same. But stuffing it under the rug, because often structures that you're working in will performance manage you then, because you're showing signs of burnout. And I really commend you for being the type of manager that demonstrates vulnerability and makes it important to put your legs up the wall, because subliminal messages of that is that management and the structure that they're working in recognizes that it's okay to struggle and you're safe. You've just you've got this organization that's recognizing that, and then it's up to the individual to work out what individual practices and actions and steps that need to be taken with support. So, I mean, I can't understate the value of you as the manager, or any managers out there that are supporting staff. When people see you do it, even bringing the training into the organisation and those kind of things, the meditation at the start, like, it's so valuable.
Yeah, and there's also a bit of research around now proving that if you do start a meeting with 3 to 5 minutes of mindfulness, that you get much more productivity. So even from an economic point of view, for a manager, it actually makes sense to bring these practices in and get that brain calmed and centered, so that we're now in the attention economy. And so the main thing is we need people's attention. And if you've come into a meeting just quickly walk down your lunch, and if you can take
big
just
stuff
a few
they're bringing
minutes,
in.
That's right. If you can take just a few minutes by legs up the wall, or sometimes I just get people to lie on the floor. The other week, I was actually inspired by I rewatched one of the Chris Lilly series, We Can Be Heroes, with a lady that rolls around on the floor. So I made everyone roll around the floor. Starting with me, we had a new team member, and she's probably thinking, what the hell organisation am I in?
Did you literally lie on the floor and start rolling around?
Yeah, I did. I said, I've just been watching Chris Lilly. I think we should roll around the ground.
And was everybody laughing then too?
Yeah, well, most of the team are used to me being, silly. But she went home. She said she went home and told her friends, because she'd come from a council role, and said, you wouldn't believe what my manager made me do in a meeting today.
I wonder if you could have pulled that off at one of your other corporate roles. Like, let's drop and roll, people. Let's drop and roll.
Probably not. I mean, as national director of Minter Ellison Law Firm, Australia's largest law firm, it was all very,
very serious.
And quite often I was the only woman in the room. There was no chance of being silly. I had to had to talk over the big swinging dicks to get my point across.
You had to dodge them.
Well, no, that's what I used to call them, because they're puffed up chests and great guys and all the rest of it. But I also worked at PwC and Ernst & Young, and in those organisations in those days, you definitely had to hold it together. It's probably a bit different now, but you definitely had to hold together. And I think I shared with you previously that when I did my exit interview at Ernst & Young, I gave them the feedback, that the women's toilets are for crying in. That's what happens. People get off the floor. I'm just going to the toilet, and they're in there bawling their eyes out. And you'd say, "Are you okay? I've got to just give me a couple of minutes." And they go back out. Okay.
Poker face. Back on. Yeah. And we do that it's really interesting to hear that, because I've really only mostly worked in not-for-profit or worked for myself. And I guess somewhere in the back of my mind, having never really worked in corporate, I wondered if corporate settings didn't have the rate of burnout or stress that not-for-profits did. But it sounds like that's not the case. It's just very well hidden.
Law firms are well known for what they call eating their young. And I know that in a certain Australian law firm that had an office in New York, they put beds in the offices so people could work longer hours. We work 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's burnout's everywhere, definitely. Yeah. It just in different shapes and forms of pressure, I think. And I think in this space, in the not-for-profit space, it's much more, human, rather than Commonwealth Bank's share prices dropping for the next quarter, we've got to go in and fix it. It's a different type of stress.
Yeah. I've often wondered how people could generate any passion to take action on things like that, which might be its own form of pressure too. The beauty of what we do is that, you can bring so much purpose and meaning to the work, because you are offering something so valuable to your fellow human beings.
Well, I left the corporate world and became CEO of University of Newcastle Foundation, and that's when I went, helping disadvantaged students. this is rewarding,
Feels
not
so
making a
good.
rich lawyer even richer. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It does add so much value to your life. And it can give you a lot of motivation and energy for a long time until it doesn't anymore. And I think everybody needs to just acknowledge that over and over again, that that's okay, because even though burnout's everywhere, anybody who's asked to do too much for too long is likely to face burnout when we're working with children.
We often ask, I'd say though, anyone who's asked to do too much for too long, I think a lot of it's ourselves asking ourselves to do too much for too long. I often don't find the pressures from above. It's like, I've got to do this.
Yeah.
So it's the pressure on the self of asking yourself to do too much. And it's a sneaky thing. Sometimes you don't even realise how addicted to the busyness you are.
So, yeah, absolutely. And it's the way you approach things. It's the energy that you bring to it. When you bring a calmer energy, often you get more done anyway. But when we're just stuck in that cycle of stress, it's so hard to see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to tell you, anyone who's watching, that while I introduced Kate to yoga, and I've come a long way with yoga, when I first used to go to yoga, I wouldn't stay for Shavasana. I was like, I haven't got time for this. I haven't got time for this lying around. I'll just come and do all the shapes and then I'm gone. It took me about maybe 8 months before I'd stay for Shavasana. I thought it was a complete waste of time.
Oh, that is so funny. And you know what? Yeah. A lot of people have left the room in Shavasana. They may not have actually physically got up, but their mind is off to the doings of our human life.
But I would physically get up and tiptoe through 80 people. I gotta go.
That is some serious urgency.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why I love you, Louise, because you've always run your own show. And it's what makes you really good at what you're doing. It's bringing that, drawing that funding towards Byron Community Centre. Like, I know how good you are at that. And that's such a gift to Byron community. And I don't know if they realise it, but, you're the superpower. Tell us a little bit about your don't give me the 7 nods, because I know what happens then. You get all the information out of me. To anyone who doesn't know me and Louise, you'll know that Louise has successfully convinced me to do a lot of things that I originally didn't want to do. It's your superpower. Yeah, tell us about how you're using that for good.
So the reason that I took the role was that my own son had experienced homelessness. And when you've had lived experience in your own family of that, you realise how important it is. And so I guess that I bring that passion when I speak to those high net worth individuals or philanthropic organisations or businesses, etc. I really do speak from, we have to help people experiencing this. It's our duty as a society that we must help people who are vulnerable. And if people that I speak with, that'll either resonate straight away, but they might help in a different way. So, for example, they might go, well, I support orphanages in India. But generally you'll find that me speaking from my heart about how important it is to help people and the things that I see happen every day at Fletcher Street Cottage with people experiencing homelessness, people who've never asked for help before, coming through the doors, just, with horrible, horrible stories of, we had one lady who'd actually owned 2 houses, and then through a series of divorces, etc., she just lost everything. And she was a long-term, much-loved community member. She actually volunteered here at the Byron Community Centre. So when you're sort of getting those stories every day and seeing those, and then all I do is tell the story to people who might be interested. And through that, we've attracted, enough money to open 4 days a week in Fletcher Street Cottage, which is great. It's very disappointing that we don't receive any ongoing government funding. I think that's another topic that
Yeah.
the irate. But in terms of the good side of it, the support we get from people who get it, who are also, that resonates with them. I have one guy who gives $10 out of his pension every fortnight, and I have Chris Hemsworth being our biggest donor. So it's all sorts of people who want to do something to help people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah. And I mean, this is something, because you've worked in that kind of space. I mean, I haven't really mixed much with those with a lot of net worth. That's not really been, where I've been in my life, and you have, and it's been such a really important teaching that you've given me, is that money does not mean that you don't suffer in the same way that every other human suffers. I guess sometimes we fantasize about the fact that if we had money, and if we had the house, and if we had this big disposable bank account, that somehow we wouldn't suffer. But those people suffer in exactly the same ways. It seems like they've just got more things to manage in the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that certainly money gives you access to more resources, but it doesn't stop marriage breakups or mentally ill children, or the death of family members, or all the things in the human experience that people with high net worth still do experience. I guess there's a lot of why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Kind of noises that I hear out there.
You should.
Yeah. I have to say that the people that I deal with who are giving financially to our charity are people with a lot of heart. And anytime anyone tries to bag the wealthy in Byron, I'll just stick up for them, because I got to say that the people that I contact are doing so much out there, right across the world. I've mentioned their orphanages in India, for example, or youth in Alice Springs, or supporting. I've got a group here that do anti-slavery stuff. So, but they're very quiet about it. So they don't want to, they don't do it for the recognition. So the people that I contact, or that I have bits to do with, who have high net wealth, are givers themselves. They just give in different ways.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful. That really warms my heart, because sometimes, with the state of things at the moment, and, sometimes you wonder what's going on in those circles. And it's really, really heartwarming to know that they are just like us, and they are looking for purpose in their life, and often contributing to that in whatever ways that they can. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And thank you for being the bridge to make that happen, because I'm sure it's kind of difficult to know how to make those contributions, and I'm glad that you're making it easy for them.
Yeah, like I said, I just tell people the story. I just tell people the story and say, who else should I speak to? Is this something you're interested in supporting? What advice have you got for me? And it's just a question. And, next minute they're making a donation, or introducing you to somebody, or giving you some connections or advice. Yeah, it's pretty simple. Just asking questions and telling a story.
Yeah, beautiful. And something else that I learnt, in case some of you are listening and you want to know, is that I learnt about Chris Hemsworth and his family, that his parents are they social workers as well?
So Chris's father, Craig, had 30 years in docks, and his mother ran a community centre like this one. And Chris himself has been the patron of the Australian Childhood Foundation, so that's quite public. He's publicly supported Fletcher Street Cottage as well. As I said, he's been our largest donor, and we've had to strong arm him a bit. I've got permission to talk about that, but he's not someone who wants to, say, look what I did, etc. He does it from a really well-meaning place, having grown up seeing his parents working in homelessness and children and all the spaces. That's his why, that's his motivation, and he certainly wants to help our community. Yeah. I can tell everybody who's listening, he's a great guy. He really is.
Yeah.
He's
Thank
exactly
you,
what
Chris.
you
Really appreciate it. Don't let them trolls get you down. Got your back.
Yeah, that's right. He's a wonderful human being, a great giver, and to support little old us, you know what I mean? When he's like a global superstar, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, homelessness isn't the most glamorous thing to be backing, is it? So that sometimes you really need to really dig deep to understand that this kind of programming that we've had, that homelessness and poverty is somehow our fault or the individual's fault, you know, and then of course there's also individual responsibility, but you know, any of us could end up in that situation, including myself, including my children. Like, it happens, it can happen, and that's right. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Another interesting thing that I find is we've got some long-term rough sleepers here in Byron. Some people who have slept outside for many years, and we know statistically that once you sleep outside for a long time, it's harder to get, you know, back into a home the longer you're out on the street.
Yeah.
90% of those long-term rough sleepers grew up in out-of-home care.
Yeah. So they've probably never had much of a solid base in their life. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So who are we to point the finger and blame and say, just get a job? It's not like that. When you've been, you know, possibly abused throughout your childhood, going from home to home to home, you don't feel safe in four walls. You don't have the usual tools of resilience. So, you know, I think it's about us keeping our heart open to all of people experiencing, all the vulnerable people in our community.
Yeah, agreed.
And I've had to have a good reminder of that, because we've just taken an AVO out against one of our service users who threatened us. So, you know, trying to keep my heart open for that, knowing that that's just trauma that we're seeing coming out in his behaviour.
Yeah, and recognising the trauma that's coming out in you in response to that threat. Like, and that's just, I mean, it's part of the work when you're working with vulnerable and traumatized people. I mean, you hear it from the ambulance workers, you hear it from the nurses, you hear it from community services, youth workers, teachers. Like, hurt people hurt people. And that hurts, especially when you're there with your heart on your sleeve and all your empathy and your compassion's out there, and then you get threatened. Because we, as a collective of, you know, human service workers, we're dealing with the burnout because the need is there and the demand is high, but then we've got this really unique circumstances where we're dealing with vicarious trauma of hearing over and over and over again these really traumatic suffering stories, and then we've got also often many of us have direct trauma that's been perpetrated on us by the people we're trying to support, which has just got so many layers, and we can't. Yeah, we've got to keep our eyes peeled for the signs. We've got to know what they are. We've got to see them in each other, and we've got to, you know, help each other when we see it happening and support each other, not just keep going on, go with the grind, keep working. Doesn't work.
It was a bit of a challenge actually for me to go ahead with this today, because I started recognising those signs in myself over Christmas. I had a couple of weeks off and I was exhausted. I just laid on the ground a lot, which is not like me. I'm quite an active person.
That is not like you at all.
No. Always like doing the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I was actually in Tasmania. I was on holidays and I really wanted to hike and do all the things, and all I could do was just lie down. So I went and saw my doctor, and then last week she said to me, "You are at risk of burnout." Despite all the things that I've put in place, And
You're
she
like, no,
said,
I'm the boss. I don't want to burn out. I've got to lead the troops.
yeah. And as of this week, I am taking a day sick leave a week for the next little while to, as in her words, if there isn't an intervention now, you're going to fall off the cliff in the future.
Yeah.
So that was actually very powerful to hear it from a medical professional. Go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that's why I've been reading the books going, is this burnout? What's this exhaustion that I feel regularly when I just can't get off the ground? So yeah, interesting that we're having this conversation today when I'm starting to,
Really
work
be in
with
the thick of
myself.
it. Yeah. Well, thank you for recognizing it. Thank you for sharing it, and thank you for taking action and early, because we do not want to leave. Like, we don't want to lose you from this space. Like, if you had to go and do something else, that'd be okay. But I guess that's the thing that gets me so passionate about these conversations, is that I know how many awesome, compassionate, like high vibration, empathetic, altruistic human beings are working in this space, and we do lose them because they run out of steam. And if you want to do something else, it's fine, but I don't want to see people like you and myself and other really compassionate people just fall in a heap or have major physical health issues, mental health issues because of it. We need to stick together and keep working to raise the frequency. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking some action.
Yeah. I'm actually a little bit worried that if I don't feel exhausted, how am I going to sit around and do nothing all day? Which is what I've been ordered to do. I've been ordered to just rest.
Well, I have a few ideas. Would you like to hear them?
Yes.
Please. I think it's very easy. It's much easier to do nothing if I'm in a setting that's like outdoors, like the cabana, the shade at the beach, laying down. You're out doing something, but you're also just really grounded. You're in the sand, you're in and out of the water, you're reading a book. Like that to me is a good way to force yourself to do nothing.
Sounds good, except I tried to do that last Sunday and there were a dozen sharks just off where I was swimming.
No.
I've never seen so many sharks. In all my years of going to the beach, I've never seen so many sharks. When I did that, I went down the sand, got my cabana, got my book.
Like, here I am, I'm going to relax.
Yeah. So I might have to find a pool.
Maybe a pool.
Yeah.
Maybe a fresh body of water.
Yes.
Yoga nidras. Like when I was sick, I didn't feel like laying down and being still with my sickness. Wanted to numb out on Netflix and things like that. And I did do some of that, but when I wasn't doing that, I was actively being present in my parasympathetic nervous system, and I could do that if I had my headspace filled with maybe like a healing frequency or a yoga nidra. THC oil helped because it actually you could probably get it prescribed too. 1 drop of that seems to sort of manually flip the body into relaxation. Not for everybody, but it worked for me. So it helped me just be calm and still, even though it was a friggin' shit show. But yeah, you'll have to talk to your doctor about that one.
I'll try the book lying down somewhere first. I mean, this is my first week of it. It's interesting though. It's interesting this is happening to me now because I've got a lot of things in order and in place. Like my life is actually pretty good at the moment, and work is kind of organized, and there's a lot of the problems that I've had in the last 5 years have disappeared, and now it's like I'm going, so it almost makes me feel like my body hasn't caught up. with where things are at. And you probably know more about that kind of, I don't know, accumulated adrenal cortisol, all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've been in chronic high stress for many years.
Yeah.
And a lot of people report that they will then, have mental health, physical health, things manifest when that stress stops. It's like the body starts to do a little bit of a cleanup and a recalibrate. So it is catching up, especially when, they do know that your baseline for your nervous system is at a set point that the body thinks is like the balance point, the homeostasis. And if you've been really stressed for a long time, that set point actually changes. So your body thinks that this is normal. And then when you actually do have an opportunity to relax and it starts to get below that, there's this period of time where it feels really unsafe, because the body's going, hang on, no, we can't relax. This place is a stressful, dangerous place. We can't relax. But you've just got to be intentional about just giving that the time to come down, and then let the body do what the body does, which it can't do until it's in rest and digest. Yeah. So stick with that uncomfortableness. You know how to do it. You've done all the mindfulness stuff. You know how to stick with the uncomfortable.
That's right. I've done the time in the monastery. I've done it all.
Yeah.
But it's about it for me. I love doing meditation retreats. Well, I don't always love them, but I love the reminder of the impact of just staying curious about this. I've got this strong urge to go and write that email and send it off. Yeah, where do I feel it in my body? And what would happen if I didn't do that? Like, just being curious, I find is really helpful. Even if I get up and go write the email or have the glass of wine or whatever it is, but just to at least, what's that about? Where do I feel it in my body?
Yeah, be curious. And, then you lose presence, and you find yourself, you're already at the fridge with the door open and half a block of chocolate in your mouth. And you're like, hang on.
Yeah.
Was I just meditating on the couch? How did I end up here?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're all just stumbling through, but
walking each other home, as Ram Dass says. Yeah,
walking each other home.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share today?
For your audience in the not-for-profit space, I think the biggest area that we can all work on is what you mentioned before about boundaries. And being comfortable with boundaries, I think, is really important. So finding a way, one of the ways we do it here is we do role plays about setting boundaries between other staff members or with people from the public or wherever it might be. And we have little practice sessions, and that way we get to see how other people would handle it, and we get to discuss it. So you really embody it. And I think that's probably useful to share. And if you can't do that in your workplace, maybe you can talk to a counsellor or, over the phone. There's lots of services available to anyone to just talk this through with somebody independent. I think that's the most important thing in this not-for-profit space with not enough resources and a high burnout rate and, competing priorities, all the things. I think it's getting really comfortable with agreeing with yourself boundaries and with others, and practicing how you're going to say it and do it.
Agreed. And, coming from personal experience around being a people pleaser and not necessarily having those boundaries as solid as they could have been over the years, which is a bit of an understatement. if you're a people pleaser, if you're that kind of character, which many of us end up in this kind of jobs because we are, I think the first place to start with that is getting really clear and connected to your values, and spending time integrating those values and how they show up in your actions and how they show up in your inactions. So being really clear about the things you choose to do and the things you choose not to do. And when you know they're coming from these values that you've already identified, it becomes a lot easier to navigate and to get that sense of satisfaction that, okay, for example, you know, I've worked with kids in out-of-home care who would have done anything, you know, for me to have hugged them and taken them home with me. You know, why can't I come and live with you? You know, but knowing that my values, and knowing that what they're asking for is actually not what I can offer, and being really clear about that gives me the confidence to set that boundary with love, you know, with plenty of compassion and love and eye contact and connection. Because as soon as we feel threatened in those situations and we feel our boundaries threatened and we're not sure, the first thing we'll pull away is our connection. But we can set boundaries without pulling away our connection when we're connected to our values, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. I'm curious as to whether you had to practice how you would say and do the eye contact, etc. Was that something that you like? I talked about role plays earlier, but is that, how did you learn how to do that?
In my mind first. You know, I don't think it always has to play out physically in a role play straight away. Like if you're not good at it, I've got a series of questions that I direct people to answer, like what do I value in a supervisor? What are the things that I appreciate in other workers? And that helps you figure out what your values are. And then I direct them through like a lie down meditation, like a yoga nidra, which you could run them yourself for them, where they imagine those values in action, like thinking about times when they've taken actions that reinforce those values, and thinking about times when they've not taken actions to reinforce those values, and then spending time thinking about and imagining how they might reinforce those values in their life. And you just let people's imagination, like the power of the imagination to have the, I mean, we've all done it, right? Full conversations, full conflicts, arguments with people that didn't even happen.
Yeah, there is a part of your brain that doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what is real. That's why it's so important to do these imagination activities. And me, in my role as a salesperson, I used to use this all the time in the corporate world. What does success look like? If we did a great job, what would have happened? So that's starting for them, the client, to imagine, you know, Ernst & Young did a great job. Oh, we better get those. So, yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so imaginings, and then once the imaginings have happened and the energy's right and, you know, the neural pathways have been created in the brain, then acting it out can be really, really solidifying when you put it into practice. So there you go. That would be my suggestion.
And I need a suggestion for my terrible habit of eye rolling when somebody says something inane to me. And for anyone watching, it goes like this. And I'll be sitting there going, don't do it, Louise, don't do it, don't do it. And then I can't stop it.
You're like, excuse me a second. Because come to your meetings with giant glasses that cover your eyebrows.
There you
Those
go.
blue blockers.
Yeah.
Yeah, look. We've also got to keep our sense of humour, right?
That's right. I mean, people do say dumb shit to me, that's for sure.
People do. I mean, especially when they don't have the whole picture.
Yeah.
Especially when they're asking you to explain something that's taken, 6 years to, for you to come up with the conclusion. And now they're telling you to just,
Oh, yeah, the answers for people
lunch break.
Yeah, just get a job.
Why don't you just take a lunch break? Why don't you just, have a bit of a lie down or a bath?
Yeah.
It's just not that easy.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my practice at the moment, to notice I'm about to eye roll.
It's so physical. Oh, I wonder if you had some other kind of physical, because it's a big physical discharge of frustration.
Yeah.
Can you just drop and roll?
I mean, I've been known to. Do crazy.
Excuse me a second. I'm about to roll my eyes, but instead of rolling my eyes, I'm just going to roll around on the floor here.
Yeah. Won't be a moment.
I learned some really good tricks from the last conversation I had from Annie Harvey about the laughter yoga.
Yeah.
That one's fun too, some of those. So I think we'll wrap it up there, Louise. Unless there's anything else.
No, I didn't really know what to expect, but it's always great to have a chat to you and talk about these topics that are very close to my heart.
Yes.
And hope some of it might have resonated with anybody watching, that you're not alone. We're all these imperfect humans who are just doing our best.
Exactly. And if anyone wants to do more of this, so I started these conversations from this idea of trying to get out of survival mode and get into thrive this year instead of survive, which is where I've been for quite a number of years now. So I thought I'd start all these conversations. You and I have had these conversations in private so many times. So good to share it with everybody. And if you like the idea of these concepts, if you like the ideas that I'm sharing and you want more of it, you can always join me. I've got this group supervision that's starting in February. So it'll include a one-on-one with me and then 4 live workshops over the next couple of months to try and keep us on track with thriving instead of being in survival mode. So jump on board with the early bird price in the next week if you're interested. And you're welcome to invite any of your team or anything like that, Louise, of course. Okay. Love you.
Love you too. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And let's thrive this year. Let's make sure we all thrive. It's time.
Let's thrive. And let's pull everybody up with us. A little bit more joy.
Oh, that's another one that I have to tell you one last thing. Joy, you just got to open up your body. You just got to open up. Open your heart, because you're telling your body you're safe. You're telling your body there's no tigers that are going to eat my organs, because if they were going to eat the organs, you'd be hunched up like over a computer or with your arms up. That's just a simple thing you could do.
It's such a good move, such a good yoga move. Lay there with the chest open. Agreed. Yeah.
But even just standing up or at your desk, just open up. It's a really simple way to thrive.
Just as I did that then, I just felt like crack, 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 crack. Oh, thank you. Namaste.